I'll now turn it over to Skyler Fernandes. Skyler is our member of our board of directors and also our COO. If you didn't know, our board of directors is sort of split. We have half of our directors here in the United States and sort of half in South Africa. In South Africa is also our other president, Yuvan Naidu, who heads up Africa Credit for Standard Bank. It was Yuvan Naidu and Skyler Fernandes who helped push the Missing Middle Initiative and develop that with the young global leaders at this past year's World Economic Forum. Since that time, Skyler has really become an expert in his own right and really was responsible for putting together this wonderful panel that we have today. I mean, we have some of the best speakers in the United States on this subject here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Skyler, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you guys all for coming here this afternoon. I know I'm very excited about this event, and I know all of you are as well, since we officially have sold out for all tickets here, so as Claude has mentioned. You guys are in for a real treat. We have a superb lineup of panelists and speakers to be touching on entrepreneurship, intermediaries, institutions, as well as investors. To give a little background, Claude mentioned every year we do Africa Platform. This year's theme, as you know, is the Missing Middle Initiative. And that really culminates over what we've been developing over the past 10 months. Originally in January, we helped launch the Missing Middle Initiative at the World Economic Forum in Davos, largely supported by a strong group of young global leaders. And among that, we've more recently, within the G20 SME Finance Challenge, we were nominated for the SME Finance Challenge itself with what we're calling Building a Center for the Missing Middle. Now, to kick off the event, I want to give a quick background so you guys are all aware of what we're talking about when we call the missing middle. Sometimes it's like that weird phrase that no one actually knows what you're talking about. So I want to give a quick background, really what we're talking about when we say the missing middle. In summary, you can really think of it as it's the size of capital which is larger than microfinance, yet smaller than traditional institutional financing. It's the size of capital which is most absent in emerging markets, especially in Africa, for SMEs. And if you were to really put a number on it, you could say that the size of capital ranges from about $20,000 up to about $2 or $3 million. And if you were to dig in that a little bit more, you'd find that while it's a range, you can divide it into almost micro and small venture capital. Call it 20,000 to 500,000 being micro venture capital, and 500,000 to 2 or 3 million as small venture capital. Now, the missing middle, it represents a very interesting opportunity both for significant social impact as well as competitive market rate returns, and represents really the next stage of capital development following microfinance. You can really think of it as the segment of capital which is filling the funding food chain for a company's kind of rollout in their life as they grow from a micro business, small, medium, and large. And we're at a very unique time in history right now when we look at this is really an emerging asset class. Some of the new data that's come out, there's in the past 3 years, 80% of the funds that are investing that size of capital in emerging markets have entered the market, which is huge. It shows that there's a lot of excitement about entering the space. Capital is beginning to flow this way. But it's also showing that there's an evolution of finance in the landscape for SMEs. No longer is it completely dominated by social-focused funds, where they're predominantly doing grants, but has evolved to being not only social funds, but also balanced funds, where they have a dual mission. They're looking for both a social impact as well as a financial return. And then you also have more and more just returns-focused funds that are entering the market as well. But when you look at the type of capital that's also entering the space, that's also broadening. You first found that it was largely grants being given by philanthropic organizations, and you're finding that's expanding as well to not only grants but debt, doing quasi-equity for doing revenue sharing, debt with warrants, and also expanding the different types of equity models that are being used. But what's really important about all of this is it's a sector that's beginning to break away from a pure social brand, which is something that microfinance really taught us. When microfinance first came on board, you always saw like pictures of women and children that you were helping, which is great. But you also found that as it evolved, it started becoming something where microfinance institutions were taking a role in it, and they were showing that you could actually make money here. since you look at the landscape right now, the funds on average are about 3 years old. And it means that the track record really isn't there. This is an infant market. But over the next 2 or 3 years, these funds really will have a track record that investors can look at, and it will legitimize the sector in the eyes of investors, saying here you can actually show that this is a place that you can put your money, and it's not just for a social impact, but to make some returns as well. For the mission behind building a center for the missing middle, which we had with the G20 SME Finance Challenge, really is focused on 2 parts of the initiative. One is to aggregate data amongst the missing middle funds and the sector overall, saying who are the key players in the space? Who are the institutions? What's the type of funds that are coming online? What type of investments are they making? So really aggregating the data, because it's kind of in all different places. No one has it in one place. And secondly, to really pull together a blueprint to saying, I want to start a fund in the missing middle space. Well, here's a blueprint for getting your fund funded, as well as your operational execution strategy. And we're pulling this information from best practices of the real pioneer and innovative funds that are happening right now. And giving some closing thoughts on the missing middle, one of the things that happened over the past 10 months that was a little eye-opening was that the real challenge for the missing middle is not emerging markets. It's not purely emerging markets issue. It's really a global issue. If you think raising up to $2 million is the hardest capital to raise no matter where you are in the globe. Even in the United States, that's the hardest capital to raise. What really the missing middle, one of its core big challenges, and it exists for maybe a good reason, you could say, that there's a logical reason why it's there. And it's because investing $500 to $1 million, the fund that you would need to make that investment would be about a $30 million fund. And it really comes down to simple math. Really, a 2% management fee on a typical $30 million fund just doesn't cover your operational expenses, from overhead, salary, due diligence, lawyers. Lawyers can be expensive. You have to really make sure, how do you actually get a fund structure that makes that work? And so what we have today, the last panel, the investor panel, you'll see that these pioneer funds are making it happen. They've come up with strategies and structures that work, and you'll see that one of the things they all have in common is that they're a new breed of fund. They're really a balanced fund where they have a dual mission, again, for the social impact as well as looking for returns. But behind them is also a large support system of intermediaries and institutions, such as Andy from the Aspen Institute. But all of this ultimately goes to really growing and funding SMEs and entrepreneurship. With our entrepreneur panel, you'll find that they all have in common that they're all transatlantic and they have scalable business plans. And they're all designed where their business overall, they are really to improve people's lives and what they're doing, but also a great chance to make money. So I hope you guys all take notice of them. And with that, I'd like to introduce the entrepreneur panel, and first with the moderator, Delilah Rothenberg. Thank you very much.